Hello and welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited you could join me today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Now, on the Silicon Alley Podcast, I talk to entrepreneurs and top performers to understand what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll get actionable advice that you can apply in your own business and life. Now, on today's episode, I sit down with Jim Carter, the founder of Legacy West Media. But before I jump into what you can expect on today's episode, if you have not already, please subscribe and follow the podcast so that you get notified when new episodes drop every Friday. And of course, if you hear something that you like, please be sure to share the podcast with others on social media, DM, text, email, or however you prefer. Today's guest, Jim Carter, is a creative entrepreneur and the founder of Legacy West Media. His current project, he's the creative director and producer of The City of Dreams, a portrait of Los Angeles, an art exhibit exploring legendary artists portraying the culture of LA. Jim has worked with A-list artists and filmmakers for over 10 years. He grew up on movie sets and comes from a family of Academy Award-winning artists. Jim represents 10 world-renowned artists, including his father, Rick Carter, who is a two-time, not one, but two-time Academy Award winner for his art direction of Avatar and Lincoln. Jim has been involved in philanthropy through promoting soccer, education, and human development in Africa, Central America, and the Middle East, and locally in Los Angeles. He uses his passion for fine art, visual storytelling, world cultures, marketing, sports, and entertainment to create genuine connections between his clients and global audiences. His firm, Legacy West Media, specializes in the artist representation and media partnerships. The mission is to tell stories through art exhibitions and media partnerships. Being fourth generation Hollywood, Legacy West Media takes great pride in representing top talent, connecting the right artists with the right audience. Legacy West Media's goal is to not only bring profit to their artists, but to inspire the communities that view their art. So on today's episode, Jim discusses how repetitive physical injuries actually forced him to change his life's path away from athletics and embrace his natural creativity. We discuss the power of travel and developing deep connections with a diverse set of people and how those connections not only bring Jim joy, but also provide opportunities in his business. After only a few months of founding his business, Jim talks about how he was forced to pivot Legacy West Media during COVID and move across the country twice within a year, and also at the same time get married to his incredible wife, Caroline. Jim brings incredible energy to the conversation and is someone that I truly admire. Thank you, Chris Marshall, for introducing us. I owe you one. And without further ado, I hope that you enjoy today's creative episode of the Silicon Alley Podcast featuring the Jim Carter.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place.
All right, Jim, welcome to the Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited to have you on, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And yeah, it's a privilege, man. It's my first podcast ever, so this is exciting.
Yeah, well, welcome. Yeah, hopefully can live up to the expectations. So
definitely
excited to dive in. And, we met through a mutual friend, Chris Marshall. So met up in New York. It's been almost a year now, right?
Yeah. It's crazy that a year ago, I was like moving to New York a year ago, and here we are. Now I'm back in LA with my family and everything. And it's just like, it's as if it never happened. It's so weird.
Yeah. COVID kind of threw things off a little bit. So
yeah, a little bit to say the least, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Jim, I'd love to, you've done a lot, and I'm excited to get into a little bit about the business and what you're doing now. Why don't you tell me actually a little bit about the project that you're working on now? Before we hopped on, you sent over a video of this really cool art installation that you're doing that's about LA with local artists talking about different sides of the city. Can you talk a little bit about that project specifically, and we'll kind of use that as a jumping off point?
For sure. It's a great way to start. So I'm from Los Angeles, and I rep several artists, and my first artist was actually my uncle, and he's a very well-known photographer here in Los Angeles and has made a huge career out of photographing portraits of different cities and of artists. He's worked with David Hockney for 30 plus years. And this actually is the Orpheum Theater in downtown LA. It's one of his images. And so basically he introduced me to a lot of people in the art industry here, but two of them were these artists named Prime, K2S, and Big Sleeps. And these three guys collectively kind of like are the heart and soul to me of the Los Angeles art scene. I mean, they're older gentlemen who have really grown up in different parts of LA and represent different communities within Los Angeles, and truly have done an amazing job of creating letter forms, imagery, and contemporary art that represents Los Angeles. So the concept really was to put these artists together and create a show that is about the culture of Los Angeles and export it to the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how did it all sort of come together, especially in the context of COVID? Like you walked me through a virtual tour and it's really well done. So talk to me a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So I think, the whole world is shifting on the way they're approaching life and business, and the art industry. I'm fairly new to the art industry, but we definitely jumped right into the virtual side of things, and was fortunate enough, actually, because of COVID, to get really good rates on renting empty galleries. And so that's we're just sort of taking the opportunity to use these empty gallery spaces to create exhibitions and concepts that I think, post-COVID and even virtual tours will be really great for people to experience. And the way it sort of happened was this little trickle-down effect, which was, I knew Jim. I've known Jim my whole life, Jim McHugh, the photographer, and he introduced me to Big Sleeps, who's arguably like the lettering. He created all of what I call indigenous letter forms of Los Angeles. So things you would see on the streets marking territory, which then turned into murals and larger scale art, and then Prime as well. And so basically Prime's studio was right next to this gallery space that was empty. And so, and Prime knew the landlord, and we had a great opportunity to work with them and do the show. And I brought in my own production crew, and that's how we sort of did it, with a 360-degree Matterport camera. And it's kind of like in real estate, right? If you want to see an apartment before you go in, that's how we do the galleries as well.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess your background, can you talk a little bit about your background, and then how the pivot to the art industry, it makes sense with your uncle? Have you always sort of been interested in art because of him? And then sort of how did you end up taking your production skills and ending up in this particular space?
Yeah. I'd love to hear your story as well. It's my family's all artists, and I was the athlete. So my father's a production designer, very talented artist and painter. My sister's an artist. She's a producer in film, but also is very crafty and a great drawer. My mom went to San Francisco Art Institute. My uncle is a photographer. My cousins are actors, actresses, writers. And I was just like I have a very visual mind. But the best way I can explain it is it was a language that I didn't know I knew. And I grew up around artists every day. There was artwork all over my house, but it was so much that it's just, you're almost numb to it. And and I was pursuing sports, and then basically I'll try and make this quicker.
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, it's long form. So, it's your story.
Yeah. So I was a personal trainer and a PE teacher. So I was a PE teacher in college, wasn't enough money. So I thought I'll be a personal trainer after school and before school. And I started to get clients who were in the entertainment industry, like the X-Files, the X-Files, creator of that show. Some people who worked as executive producers around LA. And I was around all these guys who are always creating. And I was like, I want to do that. So I started writing scripts, and I started, taking improv classes and doing these things as a really good way to take this mind that I have that just never stops and put it towards something that's not just physical. And long story short, I got injured for the third time. I broke my leg for the third time. And after that, it was just like, I can't keep doing this. I need to transition out of something that's physical labor and into something else. And I had all these ideas, and I ended up working with a good friend over at promoting the next World Cup in Doha. And he started a business, and the opportunity there was to try and take people in the entertainment industry and athletes over there for paid appearances ahead of the World Cup and through different partnerships. And from that experience, I met a lot of people in the art industry, and and there's a huge appetite for art, here in Los Angeles, New York, in the Middle East. And that's sort of how that idea began to form in my mind. Gotcha.
No, yeah, it's interesting. And, there's some similarities that actually I wasn't really aware of until we actually hopped on this. So my mom's side of the family, they were all entertainers. Grandfather was a comedian and had, plenty of appearances on a couple different TV shows, Father Murphy way back in the day.
Cool.
and grandmother was a big band singer, and she sang her entire life. Uncle's in the music business, other uncle ran, public radio. So like I've got some of that creativity, and as a kid did some of the acting things and things like that. But also I was very focused on soccer, which, playing sports, and that kind of is where I ended up going. And obviously with the podcast, kind of getting a little bit back into some of the creativity and the creation stuff. So it's interesting, the similarities between the blend of the athletic, and then also the artistic side and creativity side. So
for sure.
Yeah,
I really relate. I think it's really interesting. My neighbor here in LA, he's an actor, and his name is Bruce Greenwood, and he's a very good actor. And he once told me, he's like, when you find what you're supposed to do, it'll be like playing a chord on a guitar that you've never played, but it was always there. And that's how I felt like it. As soon as I've started doing this business that I started really like almost a year ago, it's all of what I was looking for in one thing. And that's what I think is really great. I think, not to take the conversation here, but my 20s have really just been, I'm 29, and I'm really thankful to have found what I found now. But I mean, my 20s have just been try it all. Like that's without knowing that was my motto. It was like, go for it and make a lot of weird decisions along the way.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, right? It's a learning process and figuring out what it is that you like, and who knows, in 5 years it could be completely different than what it is today. And
for sure,
that's part of the process.
And I think also, like, with that is, I'm very fortunate that I've traveled a lot in my life, and I have friends truly all around the world. And like my roommates in college are from the Congo, from Cameroon, Colombia. Like I have a lot of friends from a lot of different places, and with these relationships, I kept wondering, like, I mean, they'd introduced me to so many interesting people, and I thought, like, how do I monetize knowing people, and like being good with people? That was my best skill, is I'm good with people. I can talk to a rock, and and I was just trying to find a way to pair that talent with a service or product. And originally I was like, I'll I have all these ideas for films. That's what I'll do. And it's interesting how art has really taken this place where I can create, like you saw, the artist videos about each artist, about exhibitions. And that's the producing side, which I love. Then there's the business side that I'm learning more and more, which is just running a small business and having things that you actually sell, and what that's like, just the selling process. That's not just selling ideas, but actual, like, almost like a commodity, right?
Yeah.
And then the last thing is just the project management. So like having these several projects that I'm working on that are bigger scale projects that take different attention levels throughout your week, right? And trying to balance all of that is, and I just got married. So during COVID, so it's just kind of nuts.
Yeah. Congratulations. A lot of big life things happening right now. All very, very exciting.
Completely.
So how have you balanced that? You said learning in those three different areas, as well as, getting married and adapting to the COVID married life and all that stuff. How have you gone about, learning and growing as a entrepreneur and person and human being?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually getting my master's in entrepreneurship at Pepperdine University, and I was in that program, and I think it was like 10 to 15 grand a semester. And I just thought, my friend was starting this business, and I thought I'd much rather spend this money doing it. And so I decided that's what I was going to do, was take that same money that I would have put into those semesters. And I actually regret leaving that program, because I wish I would have gotten the degree and do what I'm doing, just because it's better on paper. But I think the way I've been trying to like balance it is, from like March to July when I got married, I mean, I really feel like I was working minimum 8-hour days. Some days my wife gets up very early. She's in finance. And, some days from like 6 to midnight. It just really depended on the day. But I'm really glad I did, because I needed that level of research and just effort. I needed to put in a lot of hours, and this is nothing compared to what so many entrepreneurs do. I mean, they do that for years, and I'm just starting, and I've been very fortunate. But I've, getting married and then having to learn how to stop work at 6 and have dinner and just relax. And I really treat work like I did athleticism and a lot of things. Like I throw myself into it all in, and I'm learning how to to delegate. So to pay other people to do work that I can't do or I shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Also to just like prioritize. It's so simple, but like the lists that I make and then reprioritizing what I need to get done for the week. And then also having, I'm really trying to get better at this, but just schedules like Thursday bookkeeping, Wednesday researching new clients. Like there's just certain things that I do weekly that are a little helpful, and I'm trying to get better at them.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. You've got all these things that you have to do in order to keep the lights on, the bookkeeping. You've got to make sure that you're bringing in new clients, and then
For sure.
also the projects that you're working on that demand attention, and how do you balance everything that sort of is screaming at you?
It's the simplest things. I mean, like getting a credit card reader machine. I mean, like things you don't even think about, but like it seems so obvious. You go to Starbucks every day and you just take the payment, and then like we're learning what systems you need to have and be able to accept payments. And these are like the most obvious things that I didn't know. I didn't know any of it. I mean, I was just a personal trainer and PE teacher, and then had a great opportunity with another guy, and I knew a lot of people, so we could put them into a roster, and then it's just really, snowballed.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And Jim, can you talk a little bit about your partner and how you guys actually came together and formed the concept, and like how your dynamic as a team?
Yeah. So well, we're not working together anymore. He's one of my best friends. But this was about a year ago, and or 2 years ago now, I guess. But he was working for FIFA. He was working with FIFA, and he was telling me that he was going to go over to try and pitch some projects to the World Cup. And I'm a soccer player. You're a soccer player. The dream would be, as a businessman, if not to play in the World Cup, is to have a project that goes there. And so, I just totally jumped at the opportunity. He had a roster of athletes, and I said, let me put together a roster of people in the entertainment industry who'd be willing to go do a workshop on acting or producing or film or art. And that's sort of how that started. Was we both put together these small rosters, and he created a boutique agency, and we were going over there pitching projects. And so I learned a lot about that, like small business environment. And he has 2 master's degrees. He's a brilliant guy. And, he taught me a lot about just business etiquette. And I mean, I know it. I've been around well-to-do people for a long time, but there's a whole nother life that is proposals, presentations, just it's savvy in a different way.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So that's how you ended up getting into this arena, and then eventually branching out into Legacy West.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because, when I think about a lot of this, I'm going to use the word necessity. And I don't mean that in the way that a lot of people have necessity. Like, I'm very fortunate in the position I'm in, but like breaking my leg, I was like, I need something different.
Yeah.
And then being over there and realizing, man, there is a huge appetite for art here. And that's what I know. And even being an athlete, I know artists. I know how to work with artists. I didn't know that I knew it so well, but I just do. And there's a lot of things I don't know. So one of the things that's been really helpful this past year is working with my strengths and delegating my weaknesses and trying to get better at some of them. But I mean, my website, for example, I spent 60 hours trying to make this website, and then I just ended up having to pay people to do it because I just couldn't get it to where I wanted it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things.
Yeah, no, yeah, you've got to learn what your strengths are, and yeah, you can spend 60 hours and then realize, all right, it's well worth the money to get someone else to do this right.
Yeah, but when you're starting out, you don't have all that money to do that. So you think, I'll do it all. I just have to do it all before for your first sale, So it's one of those things, because I have big projects that take months to happen, and then I have sales that can happen every day. So before you have your first sale in anything, it's kind of scary to be spending money on things, especially when you have a wedding coming up that then gets canceled for COVID. You move back across the country. I mean, it's been a year for everyone, right?
Yeah, it has. And yeah, moving cross coasts to the other side, starting a business, getting married. Yeah, there's a lot of priorities, a lot of things that you're doing all at once.
Yeah, but I'll say this, and I think one of the things I would say, and I'm very new into this, it's my first year in my own business. And, actually running a small personal training business is definitely part of that. But I think, I actually listened to one of your podcasts before this on this guy who was the VC was like one of your most recent podcasts you told me to listen to.
Was it Brad Feld with?
Yeah. And he was just talking about, it was like sort of an accumulation of different events and experiences and relationships. And like, that's how I feel. I mean, it's like, I'm now realizing all these people who I know, who now I can talk to and bring into these business opportunities that are, you know, one of my good friends told me, is like, if my clients are successful, even if they're small wins, then I'll be successful. And so that's really been trying to hit singles, hit doubles, and of course the home runs will come.
Yeah, no, I love that. There's, I think what Brad had talked about was this give first mentality, where it's like, hey, I don't know, you know, at what point this will come back to me, in what way. I expect that, you know, me doing something good probably will pay me back in some regard, but I'm not worried about it being today or tomorrow or 10 years from now. It's like, let's give back to the community and other people. And through that continued, you know, giving first mentality and supporting others, you'll end up having it come back to you in some way or another.
Yeah, I agree. I had a mentor of mine always saying, if your motive is to always give, you'll never be doing wrong, you know? And I thought that was really, really great, because I've had a lot of mentors from my personal life that I think have really benefited my professional life and my relationships, me being with the wife that I'm with. I mean, these are things that it takes a team, you know, to carry someone. And the thing I'll say along those lines too is, like, you know, my uncle, who is one of the people I work with, he is like, I mean, he has 50 years in the art industry at the highest level. And everything he says is like gold to me. I mean, it's like, I soak it up. And you know, it's really important to have mentors. It's so crucial for me to have a mentor in my professional life who I also work with, who tells me how to do it all. And like, and if I'm out of line, he's like, he lays into me, because I need that. You know, I'm learning, I'm very young and I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. I can do 100 million things. And he'll just be like, just send one idea, you know? And it's good. It's important, because in this modern era of just entrepreneurship and idea development and creativity and how people portray themselves, everyone's doing everything, you know? And it was really hard when I was starting my business to think, well, I have all these connections in production. Like I can shoot commercials, I can do these things, branded content. I'm repping artists. And I've talked to a lot of smart people who said, like, every person I introduce myself to, if I'm not telling them about the art that I'm repping, they're not going to see me as an art broker or someone in that space. It's like a lost client, if that makes sense, like immediately. And so I really had to fine tune what I was doing through my company. And now I feel like it's all aligning. It's all aligning really well.
That's awesome, Jim. I'm excited to hear that. So what would you, if you were going to give me the quick elevator pitch describing like Legacy West Media, like how would you pitch the business and describe what it is that you do?
Sure. So Legacy West Media, this is the elevator pitch for you, specializes in artist representation and media partnerships. So what we do is we create unique projects for our artists, utilizing our network in the entertainment industry and art industry. So we do this by, you know, reaching out to clients abroad, creating exhibitions that could go over to major events like the Olympics, the World Cup, things like that. Like, those are the big term goals that we're looking for. Yeah. And then also day-to-day work in sort of archiving artwork, cataloging artwork, digitizing it, creating content around artists. And so that's sort of the process, is big term projects and then day-to-day sort of management and being helpful for our artists. Because one of the things I've learned in my brief experience in this is that, you know, and my sister who runs her own business is an artist, and artists just want to create. You know, like, from my experiences, they'd much rather just create than spend any time doing the marketing of their material or the cataloging of it or anything. So, but I find that to be creative. That's just one of the things that I like. I actually enjoy being around the artwork, photographing it, sizing it, pricing it, titling it, putting them in series and presentations that then galleries and collectors can then appreciate. So it's been this cool, you know, my uncle told me it's like this triangle of, you know, you have the artist who's creating, the broker who feels like in the marketing of it they're creating, and then the person who collects the art is a part of that process as well. And they feel like they're creating by owning that artwork. Yeah. Because one of the things I've learned with art, at least the artists I work with, is there's a story behind every piece. And that's what's really special. Is I don't have a background in fine art. I didn't go to Sotheby's offers like certificates and those sort of things. I don't have a degree in art business. but I feel like a storyteller. And so I try to tell the story of the art and how that relates to me emotionally, rather than from an educational background that I don't have.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting that you bring that up and tie it back to that emotional story versus, here's the time period and I don't know the art. I don't have an art history major either. So I don't have that context either, but yeah, that story and what does it mean to the artist? What does it mean to the collector or the viewer that is admiring the artwork and creating that emotional connection between all the parties involved?
Yeah. And I think there's several things in life. I mean, sports is one of them, art is one of them, music, that are these like common languages between anywhere in the world, right? Between people from different demographics I brought a soccer ball, and I took it to Israel, then I took it to Palestine, then I took it to, around the world. I mean, and I just to see what everyone would do with a ball.
Yeah.
And it's truly a passport. It's it's an avenue into other people's lives. And art is the same. I think, especially working on this project we just did, art has become this vehicle for me to see a side of Los Angeles that I didn't even know existed. I'm a true like West Sider of LA, and like I didn't really go east of the Grove or Mid City, and the artists I'm working with primarily are in the downtown Los Angeles area, and it's been a whole experience to learn that the project we just did was called City of Dreams: A Portrait of Los Angeles, and the focus is an exploration of the intersection of Los Angeles culture through imagery, canvas, and lettering. And what's really amazing is you have the cinematic old Hollywood look of Los Angeles through photography, and then you have the symbolic LA contemporary art, and they're like both 100% LA, which is what I love. It's like they're both 1000% authentically Los Angeles, and they tell different stories, and yet they're like 5 blocks away from each other. That's what's so amazing. And I think in this, from what I see of consumerism, is people want diversity, people want things that should have been this way for a long time. But I'm very fortunate that my life for my whole life has been filled with diversity, through sports, through anything really. I mean, I just have always sought that out because I find it much more interesting than just having a life that's all the same type of people around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it goes back to what you were talking about, how you have friends all over the world from different places, from the Congo, from Colombia, and all over the world. What, I guess, have you learned, or have you been able to use based on your experience of having all these diverse connections to people and cultures and communities? How has that like enriched your life, and as well as just helped you in general?
For sure. I think the enriching part is pretty natural, because when you go to these places, you're experiencing the culture and the hospitality and just an experience of life that you would never have had. I mean, like, it's a window into a world that is new food and new clothing, new language. And, some of my first hits of this, I think, like I've been to Uganda, I've been to Haiti, Costa Rica, like I said, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, and just seeing where you gravitate towards it. And I think, like, for me, I just was listening to what the yeses were and where I found myself going. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, understanding that, especially through art, there's a huge appetite for different cultures and different experiences. I mean, here in Los Angeles, the urban art scene has been something that's been popular for a while. And in New York, in like the late 80s, the bubble graffiti letters were very popular. I mean, there's just been all these movements. And now it's there's a lot of pop art and very cool statues that people like to collect around certain artists. And it's just trying to shine a light on these stories about people that a lot of people don't know they exist. I mean, you're talking about like brilliant artwork that some people just they don't even know it's out there.
Yeah. So if you don't have a background in art, so I don't particularly have a background in art. I grew up in the South, so there wasn't a whole lot of like graffiti or urban art or things like that. But now living in New York City, there's art everywhere. What, like, if someone was just sort of wanting to discover the art scene or getting interested in it, how would you recommend folks start to get exposure to art in the art market?
Totally. I mean, I think for me, I have, my approach is like getting art books, like used art books. I have a ton of used art books about different artists. And and then just spending time going to galleries and things like that. I mean, now you can't obviously, but maybe virtual experiences. And I think the thing too to recognize that I've been realizing, and I have a small to medium sized art collection myself, is that it's something that really appreciates over time. So if you collect the right type of artwork, it's actually something that can be very financially beneficial for you. And my father has an amazing story that he was at Andy Warhol's studio forever ago, like before Andy Warhol was Andy Warhol. And he said that, he had like a couple $100 with him in his wallet. And there was a ton of like sketches around and small portraits and things like that and photographs that Andy had done. And he just said he could have spent $1,000 that day and bought in like 10 to 15 pieces of art. And that could have been his life. You know what I mean? You just think about it that way. And so there's the interesting thing about the art industry that I'm learning is you obviously have your Sotheby's and Christie's and some of these, heavy hitters. And but I think there's this huge space for me to live in, which is artwork between that $5,000 and $150,000 range that people in the age range of their late 20s to 45, 50 are looking to collect art and looking to have a centerpiece in their home that tells a story and are looking for a unique story. And that's sort of where I'm trying to find that. I'm in that space. And and if it goes from there, great. But I'm very happy in the space I'm in because I think that for people who don't know about art but want to collect it, it's they're really buying it for the story and how they relate to it. Right. Yeah. So I would say like people looking for their interests, following their own interests is the best way to find the art that they're going to like.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Finding something that is important to you and you resonate with, brings out emotions or a story that you connect with. I like that a lot.
But I think also similarly for you, it's like you do interviews of all these interesting people, right? And you're an interesting guy yourself. So maybe there's times you're in a podcast and you think, wow, I could definitely use this person's information and experience to help what I'm doing. And I think in the entrepreneurial spirit, there's a lot of giving and there's a lot of, at least when I was in New York, I noticed that everyone was doing what they were doing full on, like they were 100% committed to it. And they were really willing to give 10 minutes for a coffee just to talk about what they were doing. That was interesting. Whereas LA is, it's like, oh, we'll do that for sure. Yeah, no, definitely next week, coffee, man. Yeah. And then it never happens. It's very different.
Interesting. Yeah. I wouldn't have, I don't know that I would have ever, realized that. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time out on the West Coast in LA.
It's very casual out here, but like underneath it, it's not casual at all. Like the people who are actually signing deals and making money, it's happening very quickly. But for everyone else, LA it's a big schmooze and big talk because the film industry is here. So everything's an idea. Everyone is, one introduction away from being the next star in their mind. Gotcha. I mean, I was part of that. I mean, it's like, ambition is a currency out here. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's funny. Carolina, my girlfriend and I, we just finished watching Episodes, which was, I don't know if you've seen that one. I hadn't either, but actually it was kind of a spinoff. So it's with Matt LeBlanc and he plays himself. And It's kind of like him he plays as if he's a real jerk in it, but he's like caught up in that whole world and they bring over these writers and he just keeps screwing people over to like get to the next thing. But it's, still based off his whole Friends career. So it's pretty funny. It's a pretty funny show, but it reminds me that would be an interesting one to pick up. It's on Netflix, but
I'll watch it.
That sort of ambition and the everyone smiles and says completely. Yeah. We'll do that. And then, it's just save face because they don't want to say, no, we're not going to move forward with the project or whatever else. So.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I mean, moving to New York was such a relief for me in some ways because it was so about work. Like everything is so about work in New York. That was my experience. And then it was nice because like here, it's so easy to get distracted by things that aren't necessarily important, but the lifestyle just feels different. So you do them. Whereas, my friends in New York who I've known my whole life, when I went out and moved there, it was, I don't know, everyone was just on it. Everyone was busy in a way that I liked. And it really helped me just center into what I was doing. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually you hear a lot of folks talk about getting out of that kind of like work heads down mode and have a little bit more balance. But there's definitely positives and negatives to each side, each sort of lifestyle.
Definitely. And I think for me, I spent a lot of my 20s like training clients a lot, working the whole school year as a teacher and then just traveling for like 6-7 weeks. And I think the reason that was good for me was because it exposed me to the world in a very authentic, real way. So I would always travel to countries, and I would go like one country where I knew no one, and then the next country I'd make sure I knew someone. So it was like this nice way of just, being alone for 4 or 5 days or a week, and then going somewhere else where I could be plugged in right away. And what that did for me was it really just opened my mind to, everyone has their 9 to 5 in these other places. And I don't know why, like I would go to these other countries and, Nantes, France, anywhere, Galway, Ireland. And you're like, oh my God, these people are just working. It's not like just for me to see all the time. I think people, as a traveler, it's very easy to just be the tourist all the time. And I don't know why I've always appreciated the jobs that people have where they live. It's so weird, but it inspired me to have this global perspective on artwork. And really what I'm doing, even with mentioning that project again, is like taking these concepts that and the network that I have here and taking it elsewhere. Like everyone wants their artwork to be seen across the world.
Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of my life traveling and meeting people in different places and being like, oh my God, I know someone in that country. Let me call them and see if they're interested in this. And if they're interested in this concept. And the response has been remarkable. But it has to do with the artists. I've been very fortunate. The caliber of artists I work with are very well received and have huge careers. So people want to work with them anyways. I'm not starting from the bottom in that way.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're working with some established artists that have track record and have built an audience and a base.
Definitely.
Is there specific mediums, or is it kind of all across the board? What type of artists do you typically work with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I work with all sorts. I have photographers, painters, sculptors, large installation artists. Like there's an artist named Daniel Popper who does massive installations. If you look up Daniel Popper Tulum, like it'll be the first thing you'll see. It's this installation called Veneluz, and it's this woman opening up her chest. It's like 24 feet high. It's truly the thing to see in Tulum other than the beach. And I met him on Instagram. I mean, I walked by, my friend was getting married at that hotel, and I saw this installation. I was like, this is gorgeous. And I messaged him on Instagram and I pitched him on some concepts, and he was like, sure. Like that's the power of social media. I mean, I didn't even know the guy. I mean, the best is when you meet people through, them and you're referred to them, which is amazing. And that's happened for me lately. But, I'm repping another artist in Dubai named Dia Alam, who's a calligrapher, and he's outstanding. And some of the concepts we're working on are, a calligraphy exhibition between Los Angeles lettering and Arabic lettering. And it's a very cool concept, talking about the historic meaning and symbolism to both, because they represent very different things, but have a very similar, feel and characteristics. Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. And, obviously you've got an eye for it because you walk by an installation that a lot of people might look at and be like, oh, that's cool, and then continue or admire, but you have an eye for it and able to recognize and say, this is a really unique project and I want to get in contact with this artist. So I think that goes to some of that natural ability and being exposed to it and that eye that you've have developed, whether consciously or subconsciously over the years.
No, and it's both. I mean, that has to do with the traveling, I think. Some people, my dad always used to say to me that people would say to my dad, oh, you're traveling, good, get it out of your system. And he would say, put it into his system, and that's been my experience is, I know that, for example, I reached out to an artist. I went to his gallery in Mexico, and his name's Pepe Soho, and he does horse photography and landscapes and seascapes, but can I go grab this piece so you can see it?
Grab
it. Is that allowed? Okay, give me 1 sec.
If you're watching this on audio, you're gonna have to hop on the YouTube so that you can see this. I'm gonna have to put up and make this one a very visual episode.
Sorry. So thanks for being patient. So when I saw this, I mean, from my travels. So this is I don't know if you can see it from the glare. So it's a gorgeous portrait of a horse, and Pepe Soho, he spends like a month at a time with horses, Spanish horses, and he really gets to know them and takes these beautiful photos of them. And I thought, oh my God, I know so many people in the equestrian industry who would love this artwork. Yeah. So that was like sort of, okay, here's what I see people that I know they like. Here's the talent, and how can I connect them through a product and through a service or through any of this and through artwork. And so that's sort of what I've been doing is it's probably similar for you. It's like you can meet there's probably college students all over the world who could benefit from your app, right? Or even high schoolers who are just not going to college and need to learn how to, benefit from using their money in a smart way and saving and being in a community of others who are doing the same. And it's just finding the need and moving into it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really interesting how you've really been able to blend everything together, and, like the concept with travel. And it really has been an asset in ways beyond sort of the surface level of seeing new places and having new experiences, but actually making deep connections with people, places,
Definitely.
and communities.
Definitely. So. And I'm sure you've had the same in your life. I mean, it sounds like, like you're saying, you were in Alabama earlier. I mean, even just within the States, knowing people in different places is a big deal, depending on what you're doing. I will say, like, my whole life, I got voted everyone's best friend in high school. Like, I've always just been a friendly guy. And one of the things that is interesting to balance is how to not make everything work related. So like, even if you do meet interesting people abroad or who might be beneficial, that it doesn't always have to be that, so making sure that even when and that can be hard. It can be hard, especially when you're in sales, I think, because of course you want to sell everyone everything. And so just having that, and you learn some, you win some, you lose some in that, sometimes you try and sell the wrong people things at the wrong time. And they're like, okay, this guy's just trying to get in it for this. And, but I'll say, like, I've learned a ton. And the other thing I'll say, this is just the thing, is advice, contracts. Make sure you have contracts. Like, for any entrepreneur who needs help with this kind of stuff, like, if you have friends who are in law school or who are lawyers, or you can go to LegalZoom, I would just say, get your contracts out early, get those in front of you. So that way everyone knows what page you're on when you go into projects and partnerships, and and that way it's just it's very clear. It's very distinct. Yeah. And I think it's very casual when you're getting help from people, or, you're recommending advice and these sort of things, but it's very good to be formal, I think. I know too many people, myself included, who have been cut out of deals because I didn't have the right paperwork in place.
Yeah.
And that's part of, I think, it's like not the cool part, but it's so important.
Well, Jim, what does success look like to you? So you're building this business, you've sort of found your groove. When you think about, like, defining success, how would you define that for yourself?
Yeah, I think success is, my sister wrote this really cool 2-page essay on ambition and how it can get in the way sometimes, but how it's also, like, the nucleus of everything that you're doing. I think for me, I mean, the biggest thing is when my parents bought their house, my father looked at my mother and he said, I don't know how we're going to afford this. Right. And I loved that story because he ended up having a very successful career in the film industry. And I think for me, success is to have a life that mirrors sort of what I was raised with. And for my wife, it's the same thing. So, like, first and foremost is being able to take care of my family. My wife's my wife makes way more money than I do. She's super brilliant. And this isn't to say any part of, like, her not working or anything, but as a guy, I want to be able to provide for my family. It's something I think that is inherent in all men, is to feel that. And so I think there's that. Also, my wife's from Australia. So there's this level of success for me, is to be able for us to fly to Australia whenever we want, to have a house here and have a house in Western Australia that we can go between, and send, my parents always prioritized education for me. And not that I was good in school, I really wasn't, but that education and travel were the two biggest things. We have a very small home, but, I went to a good school and we went on interesting trips. And I think those are the things to me that are what I want to be able to afford,
Yeah.
I'll probably always own a truck. Like, I'll like to drive a truck. So I don't think I don't know, maybe I'll get a Range Rover someday, but I'd also rather a Silverado, like a brand new black Silverado. I like the Ram that I drive, but I don't think it's, of course there's the material things, but I'd much rather be able to go to the World Cup every 4 years and stay in an amazing hotel and not have to stress about that while my kids are in a good school. Like, everything for me, success is becoming about my family that I'm going to be having soon. And not soon. My wife would be like, hey, with the next, let's say, next 3 years, let's say.
Nice. Yeah, no, I love that. And being able to have that vision for what you want the future to look like and what success is. And
but also specifically, I should add are some specifics to this, because there are some very tangible things, which are, I want my artists I want to do exhibitions for each of my artists in different countries.
okay.
I want to have projects at each of the World Cups and Olympics, and I want to eventually own a gallery. So right now isn't the time to own a gallery because of COVID. I've just been renting out gallery spaces and it's been working fine. But I think eventually I'd love to have a place in a different country where I have my own gallery and I can bring all these artists who I work with to these spaces and do, without having to get other sponsors and other people involved, be able to have it to be something that's mine.
Nice. Yeah. I love that. Any idea where you want that gallery overseas?
It's funny because based on where I'm working a lot, like I've really been working primarily in the Middle East. So I think there's especially for Los Angeles art, I think there's a big opportunity there. But I think for me, it'd be great if it could be either here in LA or in Perth, where my wife is from. Not that there's it's not the right place, but 10 years from now, if it was, that'd be pretty ideal.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. What advice would you give to someone that wanted to follow in your footsteps, build a business, maybe it's art related or creative related? What advice would you give to someone just starting out?
I would say there's a few things that I've done. One is look into your life for who you have as a mentor or who you could have as a mentor in a field that you're interested in or related to, and ask that person to go to coffee. And don't make it a thing where you're saying, can you give me a job? But just make that relationship, instead of, can I get a quick win and a job that's going to pay me a salary? Can it be a relationship that I have for 15 years, 20 years? This is someone who I don't ask for monetary things, but I ask for advice. Yeah. And I think that's really beneficial, because people who are at the top of their game in any field don't really have the time or don't really want to put the effort in, I think, to do something if someone's just trying to get something out of it quickly. I think they're much more interested in someone who has their own passion and purpose. And, like when I was writing scripts, to try and get very established people in Hollywood to read these scripts is not an easy thing, even though if I've known them for my whole life, because they're working on their films. You know what I mean? So I think I would make a list of all the people I know in the industry that I'm interested in and take them all to coffee. And that's how I would start. And I would make a website for sure. I would make a website and don't make it public yet, but just continue to play with it. I would think about whatever company I'm doing and try and put it into 5 slides in a presentation. And that way you can start to even 3 and narrow into what you think your focus actually is. Yeah. And look just around you. I think that's the thing that people overlook the most, is people probably have these interests because they've had experiences with people that have shown them some sort of aspect of these businesses that they might be interested in. And so if they just make a list of all the people they know in these different industries, it could be really helpful into beginning their career and beginning a direction. Because a lot of people, if they like them, will then either refer them to the right person or give them some piece of advice that really helps them on their way.
No, I love that. I think that's a great way to approach starting out and just building relationships, deep relationships, not just, hey, how you doing? And
completely
transactional. So I like that a lot.
Yeah.
So you brought it up earlier, but obviously a big focus for me is financial well-being. And I'd love if you could describe, Jim, your relationship with money.
Yeah. I think for full transparency, it's important to mention that I've never been hungry. I've never been like, if I wanted food when I was growing up, I always had access to it. I was very fortunate in that way. I went to private schools. Like, money is something that I think my parents didn't talk much about. And I think interestingly enough, because my family's in film, between projects, it was always like, okay, we're not going to go out to dinner, or something like that. It was kind of this weird not scarcity mindset, but it just wasn't talked about. And, and I remember being in college, and my friend was like, hey, he was paying for his dinner with a credit card. And I was like, dude, I don't even have a credit card. How'd you do that? And he took me to the bank, so there's this like financial literacy that I just didn't have, even though I grew up around people who maybe they just understood it right away. I just never understood it. And it's really had to be something that even recently, I'm talking like I'm way behind on this, but I'm married and we don't talk about it enough, and like running a small business and knowing what what you're spending every month. I mean, these are such simple things, but I would say I'm learning, man. I'm learning,
Yeah.
and I think it's really easy for me, especially when we moved to New York. We spent a fortune moving to New York and making our lives in New York livable, and then leaving New York. So it's been a very expensive year, in a time where it's scary to have an expensive year. So I think we're in this place now. I say we just because I'm married, so it's kind of become more of a group conversation in that way.
Yeah.
But most of my 20s, I just made money to spend it. And I'm actually happy I did. I think maybe I would have more now if I didn't do that. But I think the experience of earning money to spend it in purposeful ways was really important in my 20s, because it gave me the experiences that I wanted. And then now, as I'm approaching 30, it's much more like it's all future based. So it's all about saving money for this. And, we're considering buying a property in Western Australia because that's more affordable than Los Angeles at the moment. And it could be the play as an investment property. So it's like, I'm learning how to be an adult, man. And I've already been an adult to the world for a while.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to sum it up. I mean, we're always learning, and, priorities change as you go through different phases of your life. And you've just gone through a transition phase and getting married and changing the I to the we, and obviously the business that changes sort of your perspective and where.
Yeah, and we have an office here in LA. I mean, like one of the things to think about in a practical way is my sister, she works at studios a lot, but she also wanted an office, and I asked her if she wanted to go in on an office together. So we have like a 900 square foot office that we share, but we run different businesses out of it. So it's like finding clever ways to, cut costs in your first year of doing it on your own. So that way it's not always, killing you to be spending $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 on things, especially as you're just getting going, because those expenses can be tough. Because I need to have money in my business account for when I need to be able to travel, when travel does open, because as soon as we can safely, I'm going to be taking 2 to 3 week business trips that I'm excited to take, but I need to be able to afford those.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially with the way that your business is set up, a lot of times, as you said, you're going out to do these, to try to pitch projects, not necessarily booking projects and then traveling for them. So
completely. And the other thing I'll say too, with the advice part, is it takes time. Like, even though I've only been doing this in this way for, I'll say like 2 years, it's, there were so many times I'd be so excited to get the meeting. Like, it was always about getting the meeting, and that's very great, but it actually becomes about closing, right? Yeah. I mean, like, it's such an evolution where, I got the meeting with Bank of America and they love my product, but it's different than them saying you're meeting with the CEO of Bank of America. It's like people will take your meeting, but going in at the right levels is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially when you have limited time as a small business owner and prioritizing. So
I can't tell you how many trips that one of my best friends, who's my old business partner, we'd go, and like, when we're there, the meetings would then get set up for the following week, and we didn't have the time to stay for the following week. I mean, it's just these things where so much is on the fly. You're learning so much on the fly. And I mean, a lot of 2 a.m., 3 a.m. nights where it's the night before the proposal and you're just making sure everything's ready to go.
What would you say is the best investment that you've made?
I would say the best investment I've made is, this might sound a little weird. It might sound a little corny, because I don't know if you're looking for a financial answer, but I would say it's showing up even when there's little to do. So, and what I mean by that is, like, I've spent, since the thing that I think has been the most beneficial for my business is spending time with these artists. And even on a day where you're just bringing them a coffee and you're just checking in, and it's a 30-minute, just how's it going? Because then there's days where just by showing up, you'll see a piece of artwork that you didn't even know was there. And then that turns into something where a collector, or a project that this could be great for. And so it's kind of like the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of the week, when you just think it's just another day, and being very willing just to go there on the days that you don't want to do it. So I think, like, I've spent more time in the past 6 months in downtown LA than I have in my whole life. And there wasn't every day where it was like very clear what we were doing, but what it formed into something was really great. And so I think the investment I made was just showing up You know, there's a great saying, suiting up and showing up. And I think that's so much of it. But the other thing I will say, this is such a simple one, but is buying the right technology before you can afford it, which sounds kind of strange, but you know, my wife bought me this really nice laptop, and I have the iPad and I have the credit card. Like, I bought all of the things before I knew I was going to get my first sale.
Yeah.
And I think that was just part of the faith of, I'm going to do this because this is the stuff that I know I'm going to need to make this process work.
Yeah. No, yeah. You got to have the right tools, and spending money on the tools.
You have to have the right tools, you know?
So,
and also, like, a lot of what I do investment wise, a better answer for you is investing in high production value for me right now. So like the content that I've been creating from my artists has been, I think, the best investment. And it's, you know, investing in cinematographer, editor, you know, lights, scripts, all that kind of stuff, just the things that make a production what it is. And sometimes it can add up pretty easily, but I think that's been the best thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that answer. On the flip side now, Jim, what would you say is the dumbest money mistake that you've made?
Oh man, where to begin? I mean, I've spent a lot of money on flights I didn't take.
Okay.
I definitely have, for various reasons. I would say, I don't know. I don't really regret the money I've spent. You know,
it's a good place to be. Yeah.
I mean, sure. I'm sure some people would have a lot more money than me because of that, but like, I just am okay with that. Like, I don't know. I don't really regret the money I've spent. Maybe clothes, buying too much clothes. I buy a lot of clothes, but you know, or food, but I don't know. I try to make the money I spend more about experiences, and I think they're all beneficial.
Awesome. I love that. And then last question I've got for you. What would you say is the biggest challenge facing Americans when it comes to finances?
I think there's a few. One would be, I'm going to use the word access, even though I know like a lot of banks offer different, like I said, financial literacy or education programs or just YouTube videos on how to invest this. But I think access, because I think it's just not talked about. Finance is such a private thing. And I think just knowing what to do with your money, because, you know, I have friends on Wall Street who, the way they talk about money, and I've been around people with money for a long time, but the way these guys talk about money, you can tell it's just continually growing because they're using it for different purposes, in ways that like I just don't think of, because I think of more using the money in creative ways, I think. Yeah. But I think people in finance see that as a creative outlet for how they use their money. And their relationship to money is one that is creative for them, because that's why they do it. You know, they do everything regarding money. I would say access to information that is mainstream and useful. And then the other thing I would say is knowing when to cut costs, like knowing when to just say, okay, I don't need this expense month after month after month if it's not really serving what I'm doing. Like, I didn't have social media until a year and a half ago, and and this is not the same thing, and I didn't have Netflix, or I didn't have any of those things, because it was just like, that's not what I was focused on. Yeah. And it was good. It was good for me to not have the things where $15 coming out of your bank account here, $100 here, you know, because now, like, for the website that I have to pay these people money every month in order to keep my website the way it is. Like, there's all these, when you run your own business, there's tons of expenses every month that you just don't even think about will be part of it, but they are. And California, you know, taxes in California, sales tax in California. Yeah. I mean, this is where those $15 from 20 different companies that you're paying every month for a subscription, if you had that money, it's helpful. Absolutely. I love that, Jim. Well, I want to thank you for sitting down. This was a lot of fun, and really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I want to leave you the last word. So please let the audience, you know, know how they can connect with you, support what you're doing, see the different projects that you've got going on that are live now, and then just whatever words you want to leave the audience with. I would just say, you know, my website is www.legacywmedia.com. So that's Legacy W Media. You'll see the artists I'm working with. We're going to be posting the virtual exhibition this week, at the end of this week, and the promotional video at the end of this week, which I'm very excited for people to see. And I would just say, you know, sort of my last thought is that I was very fragmented for a long time professionally. I thought I could do a million things, and it scared me that it was so fragmented, even though I was still working at a job. And what I've learned now doing what I'm doing is what I hope for other people, and from what I found, is when you find the right thing, you'll be using all of those fragments in one direction. And it's amazing, because all the different parts that I wanted to be a writer, an actor, a producer, a businessman, a pro athlete, you can use them all towards the same thing. And it's a very special feeling. It's purpose. It's the best feeling.
I love it. Jim, thanks so much for sitting down, and we'll link to all this in the show notes. And I definitely recommend, if you listen to this episode, watch it. I'm going to, assuming I get some permission from Jim here, try to incorporate some of the videos and things that he's got and show some of the different artists and artworks in the actual post-production of this. So
great.
Cool. Thanks so much for sitting down, man.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, man.
That's it for today's episode of the Silicon Alley podcast. I hope that you enjoyed the interview with Jim Carter. I had a lot of fun speaking with Jim and hearing his experience as a young business owner, not only working through tough challenges within his business, but also getting married amidst the pandemic. What really stuck out to me, though, is Jim's attitude and optimism to continue to pursue his passions, and how one of his biggest assets is building relationships. You can see how beneficial that is in his line of work and creating global opportunities for his clients and connections. On your way out, if you listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, or if you just want to be really nice, please click on the show page within Apple Podcasts app, scroll past all the recent episodes, and towards the bottom, can leave an honest rating and review. Your feedback is really important to me, and positive ratings help others find the podcast. So that's it for today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of Silicon Alley Podcast. Have a creative day, everyone.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place. Some words got you searching for the bright side over and